Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to continue my talk on Ghostwriter Talks About. Today I'm going to be looking at the subject of working as a ghostwriter, freelancing as a ghostwriter. What is that like? I want to talk about the ups and downs of being a ghostwriter, and I want to talk about the challenges and some of the solutions that I've discovered on how to deal with those challenges as a ghostwriter. So this is kind of like the couple to working with a ghostwriter. So this is working as a ghostwriter. So once again, as a reminder for those who are still a little bit unsure, what does this mean to be a ghostwriter? Ghostwriter means that you are writing content for someone who has hired you. Your name will not be on the product, and you may not even be credited anywhere. Beyond the payment for writing the first draft, you will not receive ongoing payments or royalties. Therefore, working as a ghostwriter is not really the most financially lucrative of jobs. Let's be real. Writing SEO can get you a bit more money if you can pound out shite, but generally speaking, if you're writing novels, let's just say you're not going to get paid a lot. Why were you hired? Well, a lot of people hire ghostwriters because they have no time. They simply have no time to sit down and write it for themselves. Some writers sometimes get just snowed under with life and they have no time to finish a particular book, so they reach out to a ghostwriter to help them finish that book for them. Some people reach out to ghostwriters because of, publishing interests. Some publishing houses will reach out to ghostwriters in order to fulfill a niche that's really popular. For example, during 2020, 2021, 2022, I forget when I started. It's been a while. But when I started ghostwriting, I remember just seeing a lot about Bitcoin because a lot of publishers just wanted to get on that and cash in on that topic because it was a really hot topic. Another reason why people hire ghostwriters is because they have no skill in writing. Some people who are really, really good at their trade, let's say they're a plumber or an electrician, or they are a CEO, they want to talk about all of the knowledge that they have gained over the years, but they have not honed their ability to communicate well. They know their limitations, so they hire you. And so this is how it all kind of falls in. They come to you to come alongside them and share their expertise with the world. Honestly, the last reason for being a ghostwriter is the most exciting and interesting to me. I had a lot of good times working with type A individuals to make a platform stronger, usually by writing some kind of a self-help book. And it was always really fun to work with them because they really knew what they wanted. And it was always great to work with someone who has a strong vision. Particularly because they were really invested in their own brands. They weren't just sitting back, smoking a joint, sorry, Ben, and, just shooting the breeze with some ideas. They were literally thinking about how do I make the most out of this opportunity. So those people were really fantastic to work with. Now, where can you find work as a ghostwriter? Now, there are some ways to contact the traditional publishing world and work with agents to do ghostwriting for people. And there are online platforms like Fiverr. I worked for Dibbly. But there are a host of other online platforms that you can get yourself slotted into and you can start work there. However, I would not recommend ghostwriting for just anyone, okay? You might think you like writing, but when you actually have to work for someone else, it's a whole other ball game. And the reality is there are people who love writing, but when it comes time to finishing a book, they can't even finish a book. They can't even get a short story done. And they think that they're going to be writing permanently as a career. It's just, I tell most people, just have fun with writing. Don't try to monetize it, okay? Just go out there, have fun. If you want to self-publish and throw something out onto Amazon, be free. But the reality is that working as a ghostwriter and following someone's outline is a whole other thing. It's a whole other world. And the reality is that ghostwriting has its own set of unique challenges that some writers are just not prepared for. So let's talk about some challenges that I've personally faced, and then we'll talk about some tips and tricks to handling projects. Okay, so the first challenge is clients who are misinformed and will be misinforming others. Now, what does this mean? So imagine, if you will, you roll into work and you're looking through job postings. You see a topic that you really like. Let's say it's on history. Someone wants to write about Cleopatra. And you pull up their research, air quote research, and you realize that they are saying that Cleopatra is a certain color and she came from this part of the world. And in your head, you're like, wait a minute, no, her family was from like Greece. She was like Ptolemy and all of that. And you will start thinking, okay, wait a minute, this client doesn't know what they're talking about. They're maybe even lying. So this kind of situation will basically look like bad information at the research stage. Now, this usually only happens in nonfiction. Okay, this is a nonfiction problem, and it's the most serious as a nonfiction problem. I feel like if people are kind of flubbing a bit of history in historical fiction, that's kind of like, it is par for the course for that. It's fiction. But in nonfiction, when you're giving information to people, whether it's self-help or basic, like teaching you about the solar system or talking about the Middle Ages, whatever it might be, getting your information right is so crucial. And it's really hard as a writer to feel confident if you're going into a project where the client looks like they're deliberately or accidentally misinforming people. Now, the good news is that sometimes you can negotiate this, sometimes you can't. So, without going into specifics, I had a client who hired me for a nonfiction project. In the middle of this nonfiction project, I encountered, before we went into the writing phase, I encountered some ideas that I thought were going to compromise the project overall. I reached out to the client and I brought their attention to that section of the outline, and we talked through what that would look like so that when I got around to actually writing the book, I could be fully on board. So it's really important for you to negotiate this at the research and outlining stage. If you are having second thoughts at the writing, it's too late. By then you have legally negotiated an agreement to fulfill the outline. So you got to do it the way the client wants you to do it. And if you don't like the bias that they're looking for, if you don't like how they're handling the information that they're looking for, if during the research and outlining phase you have a fundamental disagreement and cannot, conceivably continue forward with this approach to the topic, then you need to get out. Okay? You need to leave because you are going to compromise their project. You're going to scam them. You're going to defraud them if you don't follow through on what you're promising to offer them when you agree on the outline. So it is your job as a ghostwriter to clarify these things before commencing writing. And it's the client's job to be very clear about what they want, but it's your job to ensure that you're going to be okay with what you're writing at the end of the day when you sign the contract. Another challenge is clients requesting work that you don't agree with. So this kind of ties back to what I just said. Now, there might be ethical or religious reasons for why you can't write something. It might look like, well, how can I say this? It's pretty obvious. I think you'll know it when you see it. But like, for example, a client will ask you to write about a political figure. Let's say they want you to write about Trump. Let's say you hate Trump. Well, if they want you to write a positive book about Trump, guess what you got to do? You're going to have to write a positive book about Donald Trump. Now, at the research outlining stage, usually that's a different stage from the writing stage. So if at that stage you realize what's going on, you can pull out and just say no. But if you need that paycheck, you're going to have to say yes and go through with it all the way. Don't try to hoodwink your client. Okay? This happened to me one time where I was asked to come into a situation where a client had requested a specific topic to be covered a specific kind of way, and the ghostwriter basically couldn't handle it, and basically undermined the whole point of the project by using connotations and various word clues to suggest the opposite of what the client was requesting. It was really gross. It was really unfortunate. And it was not a good situation. So just say no unless you really need that paycheck and you feel like you can compromise somewhere and just do the job and get out. Then you can do it. But if not, then don't do it. Stop it. Get out. Now, sometimes the client will be really upfront with that. So if you're tackling a nonfiction topic, or let's say they want you to write a fantasy book with a certain kind of spicy scene in it, you should know that before going in. Even into the outline. Most clients, if they reach out to you for work, it would be really good for you to say, can I look over your sketches? Can I take a look at your notes? Or can you give me a small summary of what you're looking for? What are your genres? And generally, within a few messages, you can figure out quite a bit. So you could say no before you even get into the outlining phase. So there is no excuse for you to get stuck in a project that you don't agree with. But just in case, here's my warning to you. Keep a lookout for any of that. And if your client at any point in time tries to turn things around suddenly and start revising things and change things contrary to what you both agreed with in your contract, of course, you're going to have to, put your foot down and, go back to the contract. Now, another challenge is the client who is overly passionate. Yeah. So this looks like a lot of them just spewing lore at you. Let's say you're trying to do a session where you're brainstorming about the direction of the plot, and they just keep talking on and on about the lore. And they're just hopping from idea to idea. And they might just be completely unfocused. They are just... You can tell from the excitement in their voice, they're just so happy to be there, and that's great. But you're not there to be an encyclopedia, and usually if you are working on an actual narrative, you're going to have to curb your client. So usually I start out very formally with my clients. I have very clear boundaries, and I ask questions that help them focus on the vision. And on occasion, I have also been blunt and said, I don't need this information right now. I need this information. Sometimes, like with one client, I give them multiple choice questions. The sight of a multiple choice question can give them the sense that there's a decision that needs to be made. And it can also get them thinking about other alternatives. But when you use the multiple choice question, make sure that's related to narrative only, right? You don't want to spiral them off back into the lore stuff. So, for example, you can say something like, Tabitha is feeling down. So she, and then A, walks home in the rain. B, goes to her favorite coffee joint and stares out at the rain through the window. C, calls her friend and cries. And the client will then therefore have to choose the next story beat, but they also might come up with their own idea. But at least it's focused on the story beat. We're not going to hear about, the lore of, let's say, the cafe or the lore of the park that she might go to. And so this is really important to sometimes use a variety of approaches to corral a client who is so passionate but really scattered. Essentially, the outlining phase for this kind of client will probably take closer to 2 months, sometimes maybe even 3 if it's really bad. But basically, don't start writing anything until you've legally agreed on an outline, and make sure that outline has everything that they want in it. Because these clients are extremely passionate about the vision, but many times they don't know what they can communicate about that passion. And so you will start writing it and you'll change a small detail. Like you'll put in a detail that they didn't think about themselves, and then suddenly it's important to them. So think about all the details that you might want to put in as a writer and check in with them. Don't do that while writing, though. Do that before, as far as you're able. Of course, with a passionate client, unfortunately, I feel like there's always going to be that aspect where they're going to want to like tweak things, till Sunday. So just brace yourself. Just brace yourself. As soon as they say something like passion project in the project profile, like just know that's what you're getting into. Then there's the challenge of oh boy. Okay, here we go. The challenge of wannabe writer clients who are suffering from the Dunning-Kruger effect. Like they're correcting you, but they're correcting you badly. They're like quoting famous industry writers, but they don't even know how to write themselves. So it's like an armchair critic, but worse. You're just going to have to ignore them and suffer. You can correct them sometimes gently, or if you have enough power, just throw your weight around. So, for example, where I worked, I had enough weight for me to, let's just say, when clients came into the project with me, they understood that I had picked them above a whole bunch of other people and that I could drop them at any point and go do something else. So, because the ball was more in my court, I could have a bit more equality and I wasn't being treated like shit. So generally, if you have a bit of a standing and if you built up your base, you can actually kind of put your foot down a bit. But generally, these clients are going to just be horrible people to work with because they are going to actually have ideas about how things should go. And most of those ideas will be absolutely wrong. So yeah, there's very few things that you can do to get through that other than suffer silently, put your foot down where you can, correct them where you can, make sure you have all of your backup resources to support your corrections, and try to get through that project as quickly as you can. And the unfortunate part about this particular challenge is that you're not going to know that this is a problem until you get to the revision phase, usually. These kinds of clients may not show their true colors until then. But if you do get a client who early on in the process is quoting certain books, but they have themselves never written a book, so like they're quoting creative writing books or something, but they've never themselves written a book, that's usually like a little, red flag that's like, because it means that they've read enough to think that they know what they're talking about, but they don't. And then finally, probably the most painful thing to deal with is clients who don't know what they want. They're just changing their minds all the time. It's crazy. Pinning them down with an outline is key. You might have to take your time on this one. It's kind of like the passionate writers who will take forever. And the reason why they're taking forever is they simply haven't thought it through. And you know what's crazy? Passionate people don't cover all their bases and get everything filled in. But guess what? There are these people who think that they're passionate, but they're actually not passionate enough to even do what the passionate people are doing. And what the passionate people are doing aren't enough either. It's none of them are doing enough, but these people who think they know what they want, but they don't know what they want are the worst. So you really have to take your time to suss out everything. And you have to really focus on specific ideas that you can float by them. and kind of prompt them and get them brainstorming and thinking, because they haven't thought about these issues. They haven't thought about things like setting. They want to write a fantasy story, but where is it set? They don't know. That's how bad it can get. And it makes you wonder, why do they even want to do this? Well, some of them are just doing it because they have some spare money and they just had an idea and kind of just want to see it get done. Some of them are doing it as kind of like a vanity project. So honestly, just like with the passionate person, you really need to do your best to work on the outline and get them through that outline. And like really take your time to ensure that everything in the outline is exactly as they want it. And let them know this is a legally binding agreement, no more, no less. So don't do any writing for these kinds of people until there's an outline that has been agreed on and signed off on. So here are so many clients that I just talked about, clients who are misinformed and clients who will want you to misinform others or may accidentally be misinforming others, clients requesting work that you don't agree with, clients who are overly passionate, clients who are wannabe writers, clients who don't know what they want. All of these types of people are looking for someone to write their book. And you have to decide for yourself how you're going to deal with these people, because they are all out there. Almost every client is going to have one of these 5 problems. But there are some tips and tricks to handling projects, so let's take a look at them. Of course, you probably heard this ad nauseum from me before, but basically, don't write without an outline. Don't put one pen to paper until an outline has been agreed on legally. This is going to protect you. Now, when you do this outline, you got to make sure that outline is as detailed as you can make it. So once again, we covered an outline on one of our streams. I'll try to put a link below, and you can always reach out to me and I can hook you up with one of my professional outlines that I use when I outline my own books or when I work for a client. The outline needs to be super detailed because this outline is going to help direct you and what you're going to do, and it's going to put boundaries on the client and what they can request of you later, and it will also hold you accountable. So it protects the client and it protects you. This outline isn't intended to be a tool of creative oppression. It is intended to be a boundary and a safeguard, a safety net. It is protecting you. It's protecting the client. Now, one thing you need to do when you're creating this outline, beyond making it as detailed as you can, is you have to make sure that the client isn't relying on AI for artwork, maps, and resources. You see, they think they know what they want until you write it, okay? And so if they give you a shitty map and you base your location words and your time management of, let's say, how long it takes for one character to go from the east end of the city to the west end, and you're basing it off of some sort of crappy map that they gave you, let's just say that things can get a little weird, because then suddenly they're like, oh, wait a minute, what's going on here in this paragraph? And you're going to be like, well, in this map that you gave me, this is going from here to here, and there's a river, so I mentioned the river. And they're going to be like, no, but there is no river here. Well, maybe you shouldn't have put it in your map. So make sure that they don't just generate AI stuff. I had I had to run in with AI quite a bit last year. And let's just say that on multiple occasions, I was given a picture that was AI generated. And then when I would write down notes about that location based off of the picture, the client would suddenly be like, oh, wait, no, there's other stuff here. And it wasn't generated in the photograph. So to go strictly off of the photographs is a pitfall you need to avoid as much as you can. So basically, make sure that the client is actually giving you pictures that are actually what they want. Make sure that all of the details are covered. So this is where you need them to read your bullet point lists of descriptions for places, people, and things, so that they understand exactly what you understand. That is to say, they know that you know this thing or that thing. And so when you sign off on it, everyone knows that everyone knows what this is. And it's really crucial because if you screw that part up, you could get into a situation where you've based a whole chapter on this concept or on this location that's completely wrong. And rewriting that, like, do you want to rewrite something for free? Right? Save yourself a whole bunch of pain and heartache by making sure your outline is hyper detailed. Now, you should legally agree on the outline before starting, and once they agree to this outline, they are not allowed to change anything mid-writing. I do reach out to the client about chapter 2 or 3, and I ask them to weigh in on the tone and style, the general approach, and the cadence, but that's it. That's about as much input as they get during the writing phase. After, when it's time to do revisions, limit the amount of revisions that you will do. Do only 3 revisions, and do not accept any editing requests. Educate your client on your process so that they understand the difference between revisions and editing. Many clients do not understand that revising is not the same as editing. So make sure that they understand exactly what they can get from you as a writer and what they have to go looking elsewhere for as an editor. So make sure you advocate for yourself. Let them know what each stage of the process looks like and what input they are allowed for each stage. And because this is unfortunately a very, very, let's say, diverse world that we live in. And there are different writers out there who prefer different types of input at different times. So a client might be used to working with certain writers, and they're not used to working with you. So make sure that you advocate for yourself and talk about your own process, because although your process probably follows the same process as many other writers, there might be some little quirks that you need to do in order to achieve this project. You should plan for delays and writer's block when giving dates. Try to add 1 to 2 weeks to the whole project time so that you give yourself like a 2-week delay just in case you need some extra time to tweak things or to just quickly do like your baseline editing. And so basically you want to give yourself a little time for those days that you feel sick or you feel out of it. Don't shoot yourself in the foot and put yourself under too much pressure if you can't handle it. If you're more experienced as a writer, you could probably get away without having much of a delay in terms of the deadline. So once again, treat yourself well, know your limits, understand what's going on in your life before you start planning your writing. Finally, if you aren't paid for editing, don't do massive amounts of editing. Just do the absolute necessary stuff to make your draft readable. So your basic grammar. So usually I will read through every page with the help of something like Grammarly, and I will only check basic grammar and spelling. That's it. No line edits, nothing. Just basic grammar and spelling to ensure that all the sentences are complete, that everything is capitalized and punctuated well, that there are no obvious spelling errors, and everything else is left to the editors. After all, you're not being paid for editing, so don't edit. But if you are being paid for editing, then obviously edit. Now, if you were paid for editing and it's time for you to edit, my recommendation is to give yourself about 3 days away. Don't look at the draft at all. If you can, actually put about a week between writing and editing it. So then you get this time away from the draft, and then you can go back at it with a fresher eye. And of course, if you're editing, I recommend doing read alouds and rely on much more specific software to help you achieve your editing goals if you're working as an editor. Now, how do you achieve fast turnover as a ghostwriter? Well, there's a few things. So one of the things that I couldn't do as a ghostwriter, but I think some of them do, is to have multiple projects going at one time, and that's really tough. I don't like doing that. I like focusing on one thing at a time, but some people would do multiple, and I think they probably were more financially successful that way. Another thing that you should do is make sure you're reading all of the genre or niche books that are within the wheelhouse of the books that you work on. So if you are focusing on a single niche as a ghostwriter and you're going to write for that niche, you really should know all the trends. You should understand what's popular. You should understand what's selling right now so that you're able to kind of appeal to what people are looking for right now. You'll need a lot of self-discipline if you're going to achieve fast turnover rate. So self-discipline is being able to make yourself do things that you might not feel like doing at that point in time. Two things that help me kind of focus and remain self-disciplined is specific music to help me focus on specific writing that I'm trying to achieve. And of course, a separate workspace is always nice if that is possible. And finally, as I said before, outline, outline, outline. If you want to have a fast turnover rate for your ghostwriting, you need to have really good outlines so that when you sit down, there's no question about what you're going to achieve on that page. Without a good outline, I think you're going to basically be unable to write quickly because you're just going to feel scattered and you're going to always wonder, when am I supposed to be writing next? Particularly if you're writing nonfiction. I think nonfiction is the worst for this because you often will have to do research. You often have to have sources. You'll be quoting people. You'll be referencing statistics. You really need to have not just any outline. You need to have an outline with all of the in-text citations included in the outline on each line of bullet points that you create for the chapter. The hard reality is, in summary, that ghostwriting in many places doesn't pay well. So think twice before you start a ghostwriting career. Honestly, the market is highly saturated with competent writers. Not great ones, but very competent ones. So you have to be amazing to stand out really in the crowd to get those projects that you really want to work on. And honestly, in some really predatory workplaces, there are some really predatory online platforms, you'll have to work at least a year to prove yourself before you go up a tier and get paid more. So you'll be paid peanuts in really, really terrible workplaces. And sometimes the admin won't necessarily advocate for you. So you're going to have to learn how to handle clients yourself. Yeah, it's really unfortunate, but that's the way sometimes it is. So honestly, I would only recommend relying on ghostwriting as a stopgap or side hustle, or as practice for your own eventual writing career. But unless you really feel like this is something you really want to do, I wouldn't sink, all of your writing years into ghostwriting, honestly, because it will sap your energy and you will not look at writing the same way again. So anyway, hopefully this was a little bit helpful, talking about ghostwriting and some of the challenges and tips and tricks that you could start using today in your own writing. Even if you're just writing for yourself, some of these ideas will also help you be just more intentional about your writing and know how to approach your writing from a more professional viewpoint, from a more professional perspective. So anyhow, if you have any questions for me as a ghostwriter, just leave your questions and comments down in the section below. And until next time, I'll see you later. Take care.